First off, let me say, I hope you never have to see anything like what I'm about to describe. You can call me Jared. That's not my real name, and I'm not going to name the exact location either, because if this ever got tied back to me, it would be the end of my career. I'm a deputy with the sheriff's office in a little county in eastern Oklahoma, where most people drive through without ever noticing. I'm 29 now, but this happened when I was 26, about a year and a half into the job. Out here, we're wedged between pasture, wheat fields, and scrubby patches of oak and pine, a couple of hours from anything you'd call a real city. The biggest employers in the county are the chicken plant, a discount distribution warehouse off the highway, and whatever's left of farming and small-time oil service work. Folks either scrape by or leave. We get a lot of drug-related stuff, petty theft, and more domestic calls than I care to think about. Our county seat is a small town with a main drag consisting of a small supermarket, a bargain store, and a gas station. You get the picture. About a mile outside of town, tucked in next to a couple of fields and opposite a strip of scrub woods, there's a trailer park. Let's just call it Pine Hollow. It's the kind of place people end up when they're on their way down, not up. Single wides packed tight, broken skirting, junk cars, barking dogs on chains. If we're going to get called anywhere at night, chances are it's there. I want to be clear about something up front. I'm not the kind of guy who goes on the internet looking for monsters. I grew up around here. I've skinned deer, gutted hogs, and worked nights at the feed mill before I put on a uniform. I know what coyotes look like, what bears look like, and I've seen some next-level stuff in wrecks and crime scenes. But none of that had prepared me for what I saw out there. And if you don't believe me, that's fine. I wouldn't believe it either if I hadn't been the one out there, alone, piss running down my leg, with nothing but a taser in my hands. Yes, that's right. I am a law enforcement officer, and still, I pissed myself. The first strange call that week came in just after 2 in the morning. Dispatch said it was a female at Pine Hollow, claiming there was a werewolf outside her trailer. The dispatcher put that word in air quotes over the radio. That gives you an idea of how serious we took it. We get a lot of crazy calls, people seeing shadow men, UFOs, ghosts of their ex-husbands. Usually it's meth, booze, or both. I was one of 2 units on duty, so I rolled out there. It was early spring, cold enough that the wheat was still short and bright green in the fields around the park. Low clouds, no moon that I could see. The gravel lane that runs between the trailers was muddy with ruts and potholes that'll swallow a small car if you're not careful. Dogs started up as soon as I pulled in. The usual chorus of chained-up pits and mutts that know the sound of a Crown Vic. The caller, a woman in her 40s, looking older, met me on her little porch in a bathrobe and slippers, smoking like she'd been waiting all night. She lived maybe 3 trailers from the end of the row that backed up onto the wheat field. She was shaking, eyes big. First thing she said was, "It was that werewolf again." I asked her what she meant by again, and she told me she'd heard something circling the trailer the week before. Footsteps on the gravel, something breathing in front of her door. This time she said she'd seen it out the back window. Tall, dark, dog-like head, looking in at her. She kept saying it was way too big to be a man. I've been lied to enough that I can usually tell when somebody is just wanting attention. She was scared. That part was real, but she was also on something. Her pupils were pinpoints in the porch light, jaw working like she was chewing gum that wasn't there, fingers picking at the edge of her robe the whole time we talked. Could have been meth, could have been pills on top of cheap vodka. Either way, she had that wired-up, twitchy vibe you see 3 or 4 times a shift out here. But I couldn't just dismiss her and walk away. I had to at least pretend to investigate the matter. That's how things work. So I excused myself to look around, walked around the trailers with my flashlight and listened. The park was quiet, except for the dogs and a TV on somewhere. Out back of her place, there's a little strip of bare ground, and then the fence line, then the wheat. Then my light picked up some impressions in the soft mud behind her trailer. At first I thought they were boot prints, but when I got closer, I realized they weren't quite right. Whatever made those prints had walked up close to the skirting, turned, and then headed toward the fence. They were longer than my boot, maybe 12, 13 inches, and wider in the front, like a big dog print stretched out. But there was more heel than you'd see on a normal paw. You could see where the toes dug in deeper, each with a little crescent, almost as if a long toenail had punched through. No clear tread marks, no clear boot heel. If you told me it was a barefoot giant who'd stepped funny, I guess that would have made as much sense. I didn't stop there. I walked a full circle around her trailer, slow, letting my light platter over the mud and the thin strip of grass and gravel. Once I started really looking, I saw more of them. Shallower impressions where something heavy had stepped on the edge of the gravel. Scuff marks that were the right length and shape but not as clean as the ones in the mud. Whatever it was had done a lap around that trailer, not just passed by. It had come in close, checked the back, the sides, and the front door. I remember standing there in the beam of my light, trying to make it into something normal. Big dog, maybe. Somebody messing around with fake tracks. We'd had a guy carve bear prints into his yard once for Facebook clout, so I'm not above that theory. I followed the prints to the chain-link fence. They got a little smeared there, then continued out into the wheat. Once you get into that soft planted soil with all the little ridges, everything just turns into disturbances, and you can't tell much. And the whole time I was there, the dogs in the park just kept going. They always bark when we roll in, but they usually wind down after a minute when they realize it's just us. Not that night. It was all of them, up and down the rows, barking and whining and growling like something had its thumb on a nerve none of us could see. That was the first time, standing there with my light on those half-prints, and all that noise ringing in my ears, that a little wave of unease went through me and I caught myself wishing this was just some drunk idiot I could hook up and haul off to jail. I swept the field with my flashlight a few times, then turned it off and stared out into the dark for another minute or so. I didn't see anything out of place, no movement whatsoever. I went back, told the lady that somebody had been there but was gone now. Nothing I could do about it. I recommended she keep her doors locked and her curtains closed, and to try to take a picture next time she saw a face in the window. In that moment, there was simply nothing tangible to investigate. The footprints were strange, yes, but they could have been there before. I logged it as a suspicious person call with no contact, noted unusual prints in the narrative, and cleared the scene. I even mentioned the woman's claim of having seen a werewolf in the report, as well as clear signs of impairment, mostly to protect my ass in case something else happened later on. No one took it seriously. No one but me ever looked at the body cam footage. Back at the office, the guys asked how my Wolfman call went. I told them about the tracks. One of the older deputies shrugged and said we had some big damn dogs running loose out that way. Another joked about meth heads with snowshoes. We moved on. That's how it goes. You see something strange, you flatten it down into something you can live with. The second call came in 3 nights later, around midnight. This time, the complaint was Peeping Tom, allegedly a huge man at the back window of a trailer, that we take seriously. We've had multiple assaults and even grape come out of that exact setup. Same trailer park, different lot number, but I knew the caller. Dealt with her a few times before. Young woman, around my age. Her name was Tammy. Couple years back, she'd lost custody of her little girl after a nasty divorce. Domestic violence allegations both ways. CPS in and out. I'd been out there for that whole mess more than once. She's always had trouble with her temper and impulse control, but no history with drugs that I was aware of. So all in all, a bit more credible than the woman who had called about the alleged werewolf. Tammy wasn't a bad-looking girl. To be blunt, she was hot enough that a peeping Tom didn't sound far-fetched at all. She'd even hit on me once on a previous call, in that half-drunk, half-desperate kind of way people do when they're lonely, and think screwing someone with a badge might magically fix their mess. I was already headed in that direction, so I told dispatch I'd take the call. Per policy, I reached up and tapped my body cam on as I turned off the highway. I killed my headlights before I turned into the park. The night was pitch black. The sky had been dark all day, and it was drizzling. A couple of trailers had porch lights on, and there's one orange sodium vapor security light on a pole near the middle. But the back row where this call was, it's mostly shadows. I pulled up outside the front entrance, radioed that I was on scene and stepped out. When I'm checking a prowler call, I don't walk down the middle of the lane with my flashlight blazing unless I have to. If there really is some pervert out there, the quickest way to lose him is to light myself up and start yelling. He'll bolt into the dark, lie low until we clear the call, and then come right back once we're out of sight. If I wanted any chance of catching this clown in the act instead of just chasing his shadow, I needed to come in quietly, so I kept my light off and let my eyes adjust, moving between the trailers, listening. The dogs were going nuts again, same as the first night, only worse. It wasn't just one or two close by. It was the whole park, deep barks, high yaps, and chains rattling. More or less what I would expect if some stranger were sneaking around the place. Other than that, the place was quiet. There was a faint smell of fried food and weed, and underneath that, the sour, damp smell you get where there's bad plumbing and too many dogs. Tammy's trailer backed up to the same wheat field I had seen the tracks lead to on the previous call, just a few lots down. There was a narrow gap between her place and the one next door, maybe 6 or 7 feet wide, open to the back fence. That's where I headed, cutting between them to get around behind, without walking right up the front steps like a door-to-door salesman. I remember thinking, if this is some idiot with his pants around his ankles, I don't want to give him a head start. I had my hand on my holster, but my gun wasn't out yet. In my head, this was still just some scumbag I would hopefully bring back and charge. It had been a while since I'd arrested someone, and it would certainly look good to take someone like that off the street. Might even get me into the county newspaper. When I stepped into that gap between the trailers, the air went from bad to worse. It still smelled kinda like a dog, but far more intense and mixed with something else, something I couldn't quite place. The ground back there was more dirt than gravel, soft from a leaking gutter. I had my flashlight off so as not announce myself, but even in the dim light coming from the few bulbs that hung in front of the row of trailers, I could clearly see the footprints. The same kind of massive, strange footprints I had seen a few days earlier, right there between the two trailers, and pretty damn close to the side window and the door. I swallowed hard, but still, I didn't pull the gun, just the taser. When I reached the back of Tammy's trailer, I pressed myself flat against the side wall and took a cautious peek around the corner while trying to stay hidden in the shadows. I didn't see anything. No one was standing at the window, no movement at all. But the prints were undeniable. They led from the side of the trailer right to the back window, then continued down the line of trailers, following the fence line that separated the park from the wheat field. I followed them with my eyes, then my feet, careful to avoid stepping on gravel, where I might make noise. After just a few feet, I heard something, a loud scraping noise coming from somewhere between the trailers, like something heavy was dragging along steel or aluminum, followed by the unmistakable creak of bending metal. My heart leaped into my throat. Someone was trying to break into one of the trailers. This was more serious than a peeping Tom. I put the taser away and pulled the gun out instead. Then I eased forward, slowly peeking around every trailer before committing. The first 2 gaps were clear. The third one wasn't. It's hard to describe what came next in detail, as everything happened so fast, and my brain never had a chance to put the pieces together. I eased up to the corner of the next trailer, keeping my shoulder against the siding, service pistol up, trying to get eyes on whoever was making that noise. I didn't just want to step out and show myself. I wanted to get a read on the situation first. The scraping stopped just as I reached the corner of the trailer. For half a beat, there was nothing but the light rain ticking on metal and the dogs going insane all around the park. But something was already there. As if waiting for the exact moment my head came around that corner. Out of nowhere, a huge arm, thick like a tree limb, swung out and hit me high in the chest the second my head came around the corner. It felt like getting slammed by a linebacker wearing concrete. In that same moment, pure reflex, no thought, I must have fired the gun. I don't remember pulling the trigger, but I sure as hell remember the ungodly scream that erupted in that moment. The hit sent me flying backwards at least 8 feet. I hit the ground hard, landing on my back in the dirt, the back of my head hitting a patch of gravel in the process. The pain was excruciating in those first few moments. Then adrenaline kicked in. I was completely disoriented, and I rolled over on my stomach and bent over to take a few deep breaths. Then I realized what had happened. I turned around again to check if my attacker was still there while my right hand was already searching for the gun, which had been knocked out of my hand. The figure that had hit me was gone, and looking through the narrow gap between the ground and the trailers, I couldn't see anyone lying there in the mud either. I pushed myself up and looked around, desperate to recover the gun. I couldn't see it anywhere. The body cam was gone too. I found the radio in the mud, a few feet from where my head had landed, and picked it up to call for backup. But the radio was busted. My situation had done a complete 180 in a matter of seconds. I was alone, unarmed except for my taser, and cut off from my cruiser, which was parked on the far side of the compound and about 100 feet down the road. I went the only direction that made sense, back toward Tammy's trailer. My chest was starting to hurt like hell as I calmed down a bit, and my head was still ringing. But I needed to call for backup. I tapped on her door with the side of my fist, not hard enough to alert the entire park, but enough that she'd hear me over the rain and the dogs. She opened it a crack, eyes red and wide, already crying. She kept mumbling that someone had been at the window over and over. I told her straight that I had been assaulted. My radio was down, and I needed her to call 911 right now and tell them I need backup at Pine Hollow immediately. I kept it simple. No talk about what hit me, just that I'd been jumped and was hurt. She was shaking so bad she could barely hold the phone at first, but she finally started dialing while I kept scanning my surroundings. I told her to lock the door, stay away from the windows, and not open up for anybody other than a cop. Then I started to make my way back towards the center of the park. I was hoping to be able to sneak back to my car, where I had a radio and a shotgun in the trunk. I started heading that way slowly, keeping low and tight to the trailers, taser up in my hand because it was all I had left. I cut across little front yards and trash-strewn gaps, using every shadow I could find, trying to work my way toward the front entrance without giving away my position to whoever had attacked me earlier. The dogs were still losing their minds, louder the closer I got to the middle of the park. I'd just slipped past a busted-up sedan when I saw it, a tall, hunched figure easing between two trailers about 25 yards in front of me. It moved slowly, like it thought it was alone, head down, shoulders rolled forward. The dogs closest to me went absolutely crazy, chains rattling against trailers, claws scraping on gravel. I was in direct line of sight to the figure, nothing between us but air, and the second I saw its silhouette, I stopped dead. So did it. For a couple of seconds, we just stared at each other across that strip of gravel, both frozen. I couldn't make out details. The two trailers on either side of it blocked out all the light, so all I had was a huge black shape that seemed somehow off. But I knew it had seen me. My game was up. My mouth was dry as dust when I forced myself to yell, "Police! Stop!" My voice echoed off the metal siding. The figure didn't run, didn't respond. Instead, it took one slow step forward, out of the gap and into the wash of dirty orange light. And that's when I realized I wasn't looking at a man at all. I was looking at something straight out of a nightmare. When it stepped fully into the light, I finally got a good look at it. The first thing that hit me was how big it really was. It had to be pushing 7.5 feet. Easy. With shoulders as wide as a fridge and arms that hung down too far, almost to the ground. Its head, shoulders, and most of its upper torso were covered in dark, brownish fur, but not thick and even like a bear's. It was thick in places, but thin enough that a lot of skin showed through in others. That skin was a dark, leathery brown, covered in a sparse layer of darker hair, like somebody had started to grow a coat and then given up halfway. Across the chest and belly, you could see the muscle moving under its skin when it breathed. Thick slabs, little fat, like a powerlifter gone feral. Its forearms were huge, cords of muscle running down into hands that weren't paws and weren't human either. Long, thick fingers, knuckles knotted up, each tipped with a black claw that curved like a roofing nail. But the worst part was the head. It looked like somebody had taken a gorilla's skull and forced a stunted wolf muzzle onto the front of it. The brow was heavy, the eyes sunk deep, and that short muzzle was stuck in this permanent half-open position, like the jaw couldn't quite close because the teeth were in the way. Those teeth were massive, more like pieces of broken ivory than anything you'd see on a bear, a dog, or anything normal, really. They didn't line up right, top and bottom overlapping wrong, so they looked like they were holding the mouth open from the inside. Stringy spit hung between them. I didn't decide to be scared. My body just quit on me. Before I even knew what was happening, I felt warmth spreading down my leg, and the taser started to tremble in my hand so badly that I could hear the plastic rattle. When it moved, it didn't give me any warning. 1 second, it was just standing there. The next, it lunged straight at me like somebody had hit a switch. That broke whatever spell I was under. I didn't think. I just squeezed the trigger when it was about 15 feet away. The taser popped, the wires snapped out, and I saw both probes hit high in the chest, just below that mess of fur at the base of its neck. For a split second, its whole body jerked, muscles tightening up like cables. It stumbled forward, knees dipping, and I thought it was going down, but it caught itself. Instead of dropping, it took another step and swung at me. I managed to take 1 step back, maybe 2. I didn't take the full hit, just the back of its hand or wrist catching me as it went past. But it was still like getting clipped by a truck. Pain exploded along my shoulder, and I went over backward, landing flat on my back again. All the air punched out of me. The taser flew out of my hand somewhere into the dark. Lying there, gasping, looking up at that thing looming over me, I knew I had nothing left to fight with. No gun, no taser, not even enough breath to shout. For a second, I was sure that was it. I really thought I was done. Before it could take another swing, something else came out of a dark gap, a dog, charging in from behind the creature. I heard the chain dragging first, rattling over gravel, then saw the shape flash past to the corner of my vision. It was one of the pit bulls from the park, a big one with a mix of white and brown fur I'd seen chained up 100 times when we drove through. The chain must have snapped. It ran right up behind the creature, then stopped, barking and growling like it had lost its mind. It didn't jump at its throat or try to latch on like you see in movies. It just stood there, hackles up, teeth bared, making as much noise as it possibly could. The werewolf, because there's no point pretending it was anything else, turned away from me to face the dog. It didn't hesitate or posture. It just took a step forward, then reached out with that long arm and backhanded the huge dog like it was nothing. The dog went flying sideways, yelping, hit the ground hard, and tried to scramble back up. It never got the chance. The thing stepped in, grabbed it by a hind leg, and lifted it right off the ground. The dog twisted and screamed, trying to bite at whatever it could reach, but it was stuck, hanging there upside down. The creature hauled it up toward those massive jaws and bit down, right around the lower belly and ribs. The sound the dog made when those 3-inch teeth sank in is something I still hear in my sleep, a high, broken howl that cut off all at once. Then the werewolf started shaking its head, just once or twice, and I heard bones crack. When it was done, it slammed what was left of the dog down onto the gravel so hard the whole yard seemed to jump, then did it again for good measure. After that, the pit was nothing more than a limp, barely recognizable heap of flesh and fur. That was my only opening, and some part of me understood that, even if the rest of me was busy trying not to shut down. While it was still focused on the dog, I rolled onto my side and scrambled to my feet, every rib in my chest lighting up. I didn't look for the taser. I just ran. I cut through between the 2 closest trailers, slipping on wet gravel and cardboard, then hooked a left on the other sides of the row and made a straight line for the front of the park where my cruiser was parked. My boots pounded the gravel, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. I kept glancing back over my shoulder, waiting to see that thing coming after me, but it never did. The last I saw of it was that hunched shape still standing back there in the gap, head tilted down toward the dog in its hand like I didn't even matter anymore. The werewolf seemed content with the kill it already had. I hit the road and didn't slow down until I was at the back of my cruiser. I went straight for the trunk, popped it, and grabbed the shotgun. My hands were shaking so bad I was barely able to get the rounds in, but I managed to get them ready and rack one into the chamber. Then I climbed into the driver's seat, shut the door, hit the locks, and started the engine. Only then did I let myself breathe for half a second. My chest hurt. My ribs felt like they were on fire, and my hands were still buzzing with adrenaline. I grabbed the mic of the radio and called in, voice tighter than I wanted it to be. I told dispatch I'd been assaulted by some kind of large animal at Pine Hollow and needed more units ASAP. While I was talking, I could already hear other sirens. Turned out 2 units were on approach, one coming from town, one from the highway. All I could do now was sit there with the shotgun across my lap, eyes on the trailer park, and wait. When the other cruiser rolled in, I stepped out and met them right next to my own car. The sheriff himself had come out, along with 2 deputies. I gave them the short version. I'd been jumped between the trailers by something big, lost my pistol and body cam in the struggle, and thought it was still somewhere in the park. I called it an animal because I didn't have a better word that wouldn't make me sound crazy. The sheriff looked me up and down, saw the mud, the blood on my shirt from where I'd hit the gravel, and just nodded. He told me to stay with my car and keep the entrance locked down while they checked the park on foot. I didn't argue. Truth is, I didn't have it in me to go back in there. They were gone maybe 15, 20 minutes, long enough for the rain to soak into my collar and for my heartbeat to finally drop below jackhammer speed. The dogs slowly quieted down, one by one, until it was just the sound of distant traffic and a few barks here and there. I sat behind the wheel with the shotgun pointed at the entrance, watching every shadow as if it might charge me. Eventually, I saw one flashlight coming back towards me. It was the sheriff. He walked right up to my driver's side window. I got out to meet him. He told me the park was clear. They'd walked the back row, checked the gaps, the fence line, and the field. They'd found some blood and fur back there near the middle row, but it looked like it belonged to a dog, not a bear or anything. Not a word about a dead dog, no strange animal, nothing hiding under the trailers, just a bit of blood and fur and some churned up dirt. The rain had picked up and had already made a mess of the tracks in the mud. The sheriff said they'd talked to Tammy too. She'd told them somebody had been at her back window about half an hour earlier. She'd seen a face looking in. Then I'd come to her door and told her to call 911 because I'd been attacked. She had heard the gunshot, then howls and some kind of screaming out in the park. All in all, she wasn't a big help. She was shaking and crying the whole time and kept going in circles. Then he looked at me a little closer and asked how hard I'd hit my head. I told him about getting knocked down, about the radio getting smashed, about losing my gun and my body cam. I left out teeth and fur and what I had seen in the light. He said he believed I'd been through something, but that I was probably traumatized and not quite myself. He told me we'd sort the details out back at the station and that I was done for the night. The sheriff followed me in while the other deputies processed the scene. He sent me home after a quick once-over from the EMTs. The following day, I had to come in and do the report and the formal statement. Anytime a gun gets fired, and especially when one is lost, you can bet there's going to be paperwork and a formal investigation. I sat in that little interview room with the sheriff and went through everything at least 4 times, or at least the version I could live with. By then, my head was clearer, and I knew damn well that if I told them exactly what I'd seen, I might as well hand over my badge on the spot, so I kept it vague. I wrote that I'd responded to a prowler call, found signs of a large dog being loose in the back row, and got jumped in the dark by what I believed was that same dog. I said I'd fired my weapon once in self-defense at close range, that the animal bolted between the trailers toward the center of the park, and that I'd lost sight of it. I admitted I'd lost my pistol and body cam during the struggle. When they asked about the dog carcass, I told them it must have made it through the park and out into the fields or the woods on the other side of the road. With all the brush and culverts out there, a wounded animal can be hard to find. The dead pit bull was never found. They found the gun underneath the trailer where I'd been assaulted. That was a big relief, as there were a couple of children living in that trailer park. It also helped my case quite a bit. The body cam was recovered too, but the footage was inconclusive. The near-total darkness at the back of the park screwed the footage up big time. It showed something flying towards me, but it was too fast and at too bad an angle to reveal anything meaningful, which oddly enough supported the dog theory. In the end, they didn't have nearly enough to hang me with. I caught my fair share of lectures about weapons retention and tactics, and they weren't wrong about any of it. Officially, it went down as, officer assaulted by animal, firearm lost temporarily in the struggle. Unofficially, I could tell some of them thought I'd panicked over nothing and screwed up. I didn't get fired, but it changed things. A couple of weeks later, I turned in my notice, packed up, and moved to Oklahoma City to take a spot with the local police department. I told people I was just burned out on small-town drama. That was true as far as it went. What I left out was that I didn't want to be anywhere near fields or woods at night ever again. These days, I'm doing okay. I work my shifts, pay my bills, and sleep most nights. But that night at Pine Hollow is still right there under the surface. What really messes with me isn't just what I saw, it's that I can't talk about it. If I sat down with a department shrink and told him I'd watched something that looked like a 7-foot werewolf kill a dog and walk away on 2 legs, I'd be pulled from duty before I finished the sentence. Maybe that would be the smart thing. Maybe I should be off the street. But I'm not ready to give up my career over something nobody would believe anyway. So this is what I've got. A story told to strangers under a fake name on some corner of the internet where people talk about things like this. I don't expect you to believe me. I just needed to get it off my chest.